येषां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि. Namaste and welcome to KYG or Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam for this class in the Yoga Sutras. I'm at a very beautiful, peaceful, quiet, in a small temple which is known as the Parasunathar Kovil or the Parasunathar Temple. More about this temple later. In today's class, we shall learn the second sloka of the Yoga Sutras, the second aphorism, which goes like this: yogaś-citta-vṛtti-nirodha, yogaś-citta-vṛtti-nirodha. This is the definition of yoga as given to us by Patanjali. Yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. So there are 4 words here, pregnant with a lot of meaning, and it is in continuation with the previous aphorism, atha yoga anushasanam. So what are these 4 words here? Yogaha. He is defining what yoga is. Yogaha citta-vṛtti-nirodha. So when you join yoga and the rest of it, it becomes yogaś-citta-vṛtti-nirodha. Yoga is the word that we are going to understand more and more and more in detail as we study the Yoga Sutras. But like I said initially, let us take this as that state of perfection, the state of complete absorption, the state of samadhi, the highest form where the mind merges into the infinite. By mind I mean the chitta and everything. So here Patanjali defines that term yoga. Yoga is not simply, as we understand these days, as a set of exercises. That is hatha yoga, a form of yoga which is part of this grand concept of yoga. Patanjali's yoga takes all of this and is a far greater and grander definition of what yoga truly is. Yoga is a state of experience of that oneness, which is what we are going to understand. So in this case, he says this idea of yoga, this concept of yoga, this philosophy of yoga is a state where the chitta, we talked about the chitta in the previous class. If this is the class you've just stumbled into, please watch the previous episode so there is a continuation. In that particular chitta, there are constant impressions. So chitta vritti. Vrittis are modifications, impressions, activities that are constantly imprinting themselves on this chitta, this basket, which has the mind and the intellect and the intuition and the ego and the 10 senses and all of that. Nirodha. Nirodha is a unique term, again, which is very difficult to define in English. So there are common popular definitions, as one of them being restraint. Nirodha is restrained. Because the chitta is no longer going after any of these senses, no longer getting the impressions, no longer being affected by the impressions, and therefore it appears to be restrained. Now you don't want a puppy to run here and there. You restrain the puppy with a leash. That is comes under the control, mind control and all of that, forms of chitta, I somehow cannot define Nirodha as a form of restraint, because restraint to me implies that there is a sense of holding back. And at some point when you release it, that somehow that puppy will run away and the chitta will once again get affected. But that cannot be the state of yoga that Patanjali defines here. And therefore the state Nirodha is a very difficult state to describe. But nevertheless, it is a state of self-illumination. It is a state of self-absorption, where the self is completely absorbed in itself. Nothing else exists, and therefore there is no need to restrain. That is why in the previous class I explained Nirodha as restrained and yet not restrained. Because technically if you define Nirodha, it means restraint. But then this is not the kind of restraint or control that we understand. Nirodha is, there is an element of deep absorption, and therefore there is no need for the chitta to be affected by anything outside it, because there is nothing else that exists. The self is completely absorbed in itself. We will come to this part in the next aphorism. The first 4 aphorisms of Patanjali summarizes the entire principles of yoga, the entire philosophy of this supreme grand idea of yoga. But we are in the second aphorism, so bear with me. Vyasa, at the very beginning of his commentary on this particular aphorism, makes a very important observation. And he says, the definition of yoga misses one important word. What is that? The word is all. Sarva Shabda Granat, he says. That means there is an absence of this word all. What does that mean? As opposed to the popular definition, which says the chitta is where all modifications cease, Patanjali is very particular, and he is very mindful when he uses the word vritti-nirodha. Vritti-nirodha means there is only one modification that needs to cease for the state of yoga to become established. Patanjali has not used the word all modifications. So the word vritti is not in a plural sense. He's used the word vritti in singular. That means there is one modification that needs to cease for yoga to be established in its completeness. So yogaś-citta-vṛtti-nirodha, vritti-nirodha, not sarva vrittis. So Vyasa in his commentary says, Patanjali has not used the word sarva vrittis. And therefore we need to pay attention. What is that one modification he is talking about? What is that one activity that he is talking about? What is that one impression? All these words like activities, impression, modifications are the ways we can explain vritti. So for this, Vyasa, in continuation with his previous commentary, says, we have to understand the nature of chitta. Chittam hi trigunam, he says. This concept of chitta, and we need to get this very clear in our understanding, because this forms the foundation of understanding yoga in all its grandeur. Okay? The chitta has 3 qualities. The 3 qualities are prakhya, pravritti and sthiti. Prakhya, pravritti and sthiti. We commonly know this as the 3 gunas, the 3 qualities of sattva, rajas and tamas. Prakhya means illumination. The state where there is only an idea, a concept, and nothing else. All that exists is an illumination. And that is imprinted on the chitta. Prakhya, sattva. That is, if the mind is left to itself, the very nature, and by this I mean mind, not chitta, When the mind, which is part of the chitta, is left to itself, it goes back to this true nature of being illumination and imprints that on the chitta, the substratum that holds the mind and everything else in it. So the nature of this quality of this chitta, this basket that has all of this, comprises of prakhya, which is illumination. Then it comprises of pravritti. Pravritti. Vritti means activity. Pravritti means all activities, all thoughts, all modifications. I need to do this, I need to do that. All this that is going on right now, what is going on, me talking, you listening, all comes under pravritti. Pravritti is activity. Activities are not necessarily only actions, they are too, but that also includes thoughts, feelings, impressions, even silence, even dreams, all of that. And we will study this more in detail as part of the Yoga Sutras. So all of that, memories, everything comes under pravritti, activity. And the third one is sthiti. Sthiti is inertia. There is a sense of non-movement. There is a sense of completeness. False or true? False sense of completion or false sense of contentment. We talked about it a little in the last class as well. So inertia is non-movement. So that is tamas, dullness if you will, darkness if you will. All of that comes under the quality of tamas. Before we proceed more on this, let me draw your attention to an analogy, and hopefully this analogy will explain it better, because I know Paramahamsa Yogananda drew upon this analogy, Swami Vivekananda drew upon this analogy, and a lot of modern teachers and saints have drawn upon this analogy, and I like this analogy. The analogy is of a theater. Imagine there is a theater which is completely white. I am developing on those analogies. I am not quoting Swami Vivekananda's or Yogananda's analogy, but I am borrowing that idea and developing it the way I have understood it. Imagine you enter a theater. You are white, the theater is white, everything is white. The seats are white, the flooring is white, the ceiling is white. Completely. There is no beginning, there is no end, there is complete whiteness all around. You are aware of yourself, and when you look around, there is only white. Okay? This could be understood as a state of illumination, prakhya, sattva. Wherever there is no beginning, there is no end. You don't know where the wall begins, where the wall ends, where the floor begins and the floor ends. Everything is white. Think of like a planetarium or dome. But instead of being dark, it is completely white. Prakhya, illumination. All right? Now, in this screen of whiteness, an impression begins. A light is projected. Now you see a border, a definition, because there is a projector projecting a light. And then a movie starts. And then there are actors, actresses, there are animals, there are mountains, there are rivers, there is birth, there is death, there is laughter, there is sorrow, there is joy, there is killing and there is peace. A flower blooms, a baby is born, and somebody is mercilessly killed. All of that is projected on the screen, and at that moment, as you and I are watching the screen, we get involved into that screen. In this analogy, you become an actor in that movie. You watch yourself, not from the outside but from within, and therefore think of this now movie as a three-dimensional theater, a three-dimensional movie. You're wearing a virtual reality glasses, and now suddenly all these actors come alive. You are part of that story. And since you're an actor, you're playing a role, perhaps as a beggar, perhaps as a lame person, perhaps as a king, perhaps as a businessman, perhaps as a youngster, an old man. You're playing a role in that movie, you become one in that story. This And all of this is happening in the chitta. So pause for a moment and think about this fantastic idea. The entire creation that you and I see, we feel, we touch, we taste, and all of this around us, the relationships that we have, the near and dear ones that we have, the objects that we think we own, all of this, the entire creation is but a collection of impressions on the substratum that we call chitta. So there is no objective reality. All of this is merely a collection of impressions on your chitta, on my chitta. I am an impression in your chitta. You are an impression in my chitta. You and your whole world is an impression on my chitta, because I am allowing it to come. I and my whole world is an impression on your chitta. Purnamada Purnam Idam. That is whole. This is whole and complete. Purnat Purnam Udachyate. From that mother, a complete baby is born. A complete mother, a complete baby is born. Nothing happens to the mother. She is not divided into two. It's not like the primordial cell that divides itself into two, but this is a completeness that comes out of completeness. All of that is part of this creation, and this entire creation is but a projection, like that movie, on this white screen that we call the chitta. And as long as you and I are part of that movie, there are impressions being put on the chitta. The chitta, in other words, is affected by these impressions. That is the nature of the chitta. Chitta hi trigunam. Trigunam is the quality of the chitta. It is composed of these three qualities, and therefore all of the happenings, all of the events, the existence of material objects, the existence of planets, the existence of time and space, and everything are but impressions, a projection on the chitta. So where is the universe? Is it far and far out there? That distance of time and space that we project to the universe are but all of that an idea that exists in my chitta. And therefore the universe is contained in me, in my chitta. My chitta contains the universe. So Vyasa wants us to understand this fundamental truth before we proceed further. So in that chitta there are these three gunas. Let us begin with the second one, the rajas, and see what Vyasa says about that.